Welcome to the Yeoman Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Graham. On Yeoman, I'll speak with people who build and grow things, people who create art, and people who think about community, meaning, and purpose. You're about to hear the first part of what I hope will be a multi-part conversation with Geoffrey Long of Long Story Farms in Newberry, South Carolina. Geoffrey has a lot to say about the practical aspects of operating a small farm, as well as the meaning and importance behind it, both for one's own health and that of their community. He also has a lot to say about the history of farming and rural communities in America. We didn't get to all of that as we had some connectivity challenges, mostly on my end, and that small delay made it difficult to have a true back and forth discussion. We made do with what we had. I'm pleased with this short episode, and I look forward to continuing this face to face in Newberry. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Geoffrey Long. Welcome to the Yeoman Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Graham. On Yeoman, I'll speak with people who build and grow things, people who create art, people who think about community, meaning, and purpose. One of those people is Geoffrey Long of Long Story Farms in Newberry, South Carolina. Geoffrey, welcome.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me, Jeff. I appreciate you thinking of me and, highlighting our little farm here. So thank you.
I'm delighted to have you on the show. So first, spring came a little early for you, didn't it? How are your plum trees doing?
The peach trees look pretty good. I haven't really looked over the plums. I haven't checked to see if they made it through, but the peach trees came through okay. There was a dicey morning like a week or so ago, but they look okay. Blossoms didn't drop off and stuff, so I think we'll be okay. Could be a pretty good harvest.
I was worried about my
things
apple trees. Well, hopefully that'll happen. I was worried about my apple trees. Can't quite see them through there, but I think they're in great shape. So tell us about your farm.
So we're
tell us about your farm in Newberry.
Yeah, so we're a small protein farm. So we do mostly pork and poultry. We run a small breeding herd of 3 sows and a boar on the pork production side, and just started that farrowing this year. First farrowing was this year, and we raise I'd say about 500 or 600 poultry animals a year that we actually try to market and sell. And we're looking to scale both of those. So we're on the poultry side, we're doing some eggs, but that's not a big part of our enterprise. We do chickens, ducks, and turkeys. More chickens and turkeys than ducks, but we do all three. And we have a couple of milk cows, so we'll have a calf about once a year. We'll harvest an animal. So that's basically it. We're on about 125 acres in Newberry County. Kind of 2 intermittent streams flow across our property. Long, narrow strip of land that we're trying to put back in production. It probably was farmed about 60 or 70 years ago. There's a grove of old stand pecan trees, and there's about half of the property was deciduous hardwood forest, and the other half plantation pines when we got here. So we've cleared about 30 acres of pines, and we're actively working probably about 20 of those acres right now in some form. So a lot of room to grow. Really want to get our pigs under those oak trees and hickories and stuff, eating some of those nuts off the forest floor, and rejuvenating the understory, and complement that with some poultry and hopefully some ruminants. We have, like I said, the cows. We'd like to do sheep or meat goats, and try to build our way towards like a silvopasture type operation. That's kind of what we're doing.
And you're, relatively new to this. How long ago did you get the property?
Yes, we bought the property in 2014, and we were living in Chile from 2014 to 2016. So we didn't really do much with the property during that time. We had some work done, some excavation. The land that we had cut was cleared during that time. So we came back to kind of a blank slate, and we started making some improvements at that time. Um, so yeah, so it was like I said, in production probably 60, 70 years ago, and we started our work really growing, like raising animals in 2020. Just as the pandemic was starting, as we had started kicking things into gear in 2019, we our first poultry flocks and things like that, and then 2020 hit, and we had a milk cow and some pigs, and first farmers market was 2021. So this will be we'll be entering our 4th year in July.
And is it a family affair? I kind of have the impression that it is.
Yeah, I have four kids, and they all help out under a little bit of duress. Maybe I don't think they all love it, but they do help out. A couple of them are a little more into it than the other two, but they're all very helpful. And a big part of what we were doing here was looking to raise kids, not just you know have a bucolic environment to live in, but to help them gain some life skills, have an appreciation where food comes from. So that's been part of the journey as well, and I think that we've really succeeded in that. I mean, the kids, in general, the kids could can butcher a chicken, or wrangle a cow, or whatever they need to do. They can kind of handle things, milk a cow, whatever. So it's been good for them.
How old is what's the spread in your four children? I'm the
Yeah.
youngest of four, so I love it when I hear that people have had four
Oh,
kids.
okay. Yeah, 16 is the youngest and 23 is the oldest, and they're all still here right now. So that's
All
kind of a
right.
nice, nice time for us. Yeah.
So you've lived all over, and you came back to. And this is your birth. This area is your birthplace, right? I imagine you have lots of family
Well,
around.
yeah, it's my parents are from South Carolina. I was actually born in Virginia. So my dad took a job selling seed corn for DeKalb Ag Research, and moved up and down the eastern seaboard. I was born in Virginia, lived in Maryland, then back in South Carolina. Uh, then a short stint where we were in Georgia when I was a kid, and then back to South Carolina. I went to high school in South Carolina, and then I got Master of National Business Studies at the University of South Carolina, and went off on my professional career doing some other stuff. Lived in South America, a couple of different places in Latin America, traveled extensively in that region, and when in 2006, we just kind of felt like we needed to be back in South Carolina. So I actually commuted to Latin America for several years. I would commute either to the headquarters of the company I was working for, or to Latin America, basically from 2006 until that stint in Chile in 2014. So a lot of frequent flyer miles, a lot of travel. And I think that had kind of impressed upon me the importance of place. I was traveling a lot, but I felt like I needed to be in South Carolina, and it was again maybe the hand of Providence. I've mentioned this with other conversations I've had, but my mom died of cancer in 2006. My dad died in 2011, and my little sister passed away from cancer 5 years ago. So we were very fortunate to have come back to South Carolina just before my mom passed away, being there through the time when my dad passed away, and ultimately being back when my sister was going through her illness. And that had a big influence on our desire to do the farm, because we felt like food was a big part of the problem. And we felt like eating closer to the earth would be the best way to be, you know, for human health, for the health of the soil, the health of the animals, the health of the humans. The best thing is for us to raise sustainably, ethically raised foods, including animal source foods, and to eat as close to the earth as possible. So all of that kind of tied in, coming back to a place that was familiar from a family. My family roots in this area go back to the 1700s. Great 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 grandfather was lieutenant colonel in the Confederate Army. Um, the old home places for both sets of great grandparents are nearby. on the paternal side, and the home place for my maternal grandparents is Boiling Springs. So, or maternal great grandparents, I should say. So very, very
Mm-hmm.
much rooted in this place, and it just felt like we had to be here. Ironically, I guess my wife is from Venezuela, so not at all, unaccustomed, unfamiliar with the world and the different things out there, but being here just felt like home, and that itinerant kind of traveling around for so many years really reinforced in my mind how important it is to be connected to place, and seeing some of the externalities that take place in our system, our I hesitate to call it capitalist system, but I can go with that for now. But in our system, our economic system, that failure to be rooted in place creates a lot of externalities where environmental degradation, exploitation, things like that you typically hear coming from someone maybe more on the left. Um, I see those as really emanating from a lack of connection to place and a lack of commitment to a longer time horizon because of that connection to the place. I mean, if you have to live here this generation and one more, you're not going to degrade the environment because you recognize the value that you're
Right.
passing on to your kids or whatever.
You wrote, and I guess this was, 1 year after your first time you brought things to market. It's 2022. You said 2021
Hmm.
was the first time you were selling at the farmers market. Is
Yeah,
that right?
that sounds right.
But you wrote, we are systematically destroying the human genome with pollution, both chemical and electromagnetic, and with inferior foods impacting epigenetic expression, and that is causing most of the problems in the world today. That was a while ago. I'm sure that part of where that was coming from was watching your family members suffer through things like that. What brought you to? How did you start thinking about food? What was and growing food and place and those kinds of things?
Yeah. So a lot of things. You know where to start on that. So I have a daughter who's very sensitive to certain things like soy. And in her early childhood, she was in public school for 1 year. She had a lot of struggles with eczema, and we were able to really manage that through diet. And that was an eye opener, because we were all look. I was raised by a chiropractor, by an herbalist. My mom was an herbalist. Very much into like alternative health care, very much into diet and things like that. But what you fail to appreciate, even when you're raised in that environment, what you fail to appreciate is how much is going on with like you might make your own bread from wheat that you buy, and you feel like, hey, that's the right healthy thing to do. But you don't know if Roundup was used as a desiccant on that wheat crop uh, before it was, put into a bucket that you could grind into wheat, grind the wheat berries and then, um, make your bread. So understanding that full supply chain was, understand full supply chain, just the impact that one food was having on my daughter's, well-being was a big deal. The other thing is, uh, I worked as a chef before I did my MBA. So I I really I always liked to cook as a kid, and I started working in this restaurant in Columbia, South Carolina, when I was in between undergrad and graduate school, and I got to cook in the kitchen, and I got to see how all the different things come together, how fats and oils and just all the different ways that you can use foods, and I was fascinated by that as well. So big connection to food on that side of things. Still really enjoy cooking. I have really deep memories. Yeah, so I've seen the phrase on online of blood memories. I don't know if I would call them that, but I remember when I was a little kid waking up in my grandmother's house, and it'd be like 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and you would smell fried chicken being made in the kitchen, and she was making a very typical, country Southern breakfast, a country fried steak or fried chicken or country ham with red eye gravy or sausages or whatever. It was always a very heavy meal. It was like, it was meat and gravy and eggs and grits and melted cheese and sliced tomatoes. And that was this really intense memory from being a kid of what that was. Uh, cooking, my grandmother basically cooking breakfast, cleaning up for breakfast, then making what they called dinner, what we would call lunch maybe, fat back with beans, the whole deal. So a lot of just deep tradition and the way that food was prepared. And I mentioned, you may bring it up later, but I mentioned in another post, just the that integrated family farm. Both my grandparents, both sets of grandparents had farms of some kind and grew a portion of their own food, on their farm. So it was very, very common when I was a kid in the summer. Our summer vacation involved a week of being at, maybe for several days or a week at one grandparent's house, driving an hour to the other grandparent's house for another few days or a week. And basically that entire time we were processing produce from the garden and, peeling peaches, peeling tomatoes, snapping green beans, picking watermelons. I mean, it was a big part of, especially during that time when I think I mentioned offline before we started recording, my father went back to school to become a chiropractor. During that time, we lived out of our food storage. You can see behind me some of the legacy of having lived off of food storage for about 3 years. Yeah. Um, so when we started that, my dad started school. We had about 1,000 quarts of canned foods that we had processed and canned ourselves. Um, so all of those things, all those memories as a kid of how we ate, what we ate, where it came from, coupled with that real passion for food from working in a kitchen with a very accomplished European Austrian chef. Kind of interesting, right? Austrian chef, there's the Bavarian roots, and then our ancestry is largely German. So there's some connection there. Again, blood memory. I don't want to overuse that term because I think it's kind of hokey. I'm not sure what that really means to some people, but um, all that stuff, and then yeah, and then watching my parents and sister really struggle with a really just brutal illness with cancer, and you know, people go, oh, it's bad luck or it's genetics, whatever. There's certainly all kinds of things that contribute, but when you look at cancer, I became convinced it's a metabolic disease, especially watching my sister when she was in the hospital. They did a PET scan and they were looking for, you know, glucose metabolism was the marker they were looking for to find cancer. And man, that the light bulb went off there, and I was like, huh, interesting. And then, I'm a big fan of John Kempf's podcast, Regenerative Ag podcast. And that's where I really started thinking about the epigenetics and ended up getting a book about that. And I'm going to get his name wrong, Ray Provenzano or Provenza. I can't remember his last name. He was featured in a book called The Dorito Effect by Mark Schlafly, I think is his name. And then he has his own book out, which I also picked up. But he did some experiments with sheep and nutritional wisdom of sheep, and if they responded to the flavors that were associated with the nutrients they lacked in their diet. So just been something of a journey watching some of these things all kind of come together, where if we can grow food well and eat it close to the earth with as little processing as possible, I believe that's going to have a big impact on human health. So
I agree with you. Can I come back and ask you about the capitalism question?
mm-hmm.
Um, I am, I, I feel like the way we've been doing things, and kind of, I tend to refer to it as modernity, has all these negative externalities.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, and as a, but it doesn't quite sit right to me to refer to this whole system as it has evolved, giant, large scale monocropping or buying your food you eat, the packaged manufactured calories that you consume have been kind of packaged on another part of the planet and brought over to you. It doesn't quite sit to me. I feel like the capitalism term is, and I think you had some hesitancy just using that as, it's kind of reductionist. Like that's not quite right.
Yep.
There's more to it than that.
Yep.
And I feel like you had, tell me if this is right, like you had a little bit of hesitancy to even label it that. Is that
Yeah,
right?
I don't like the term.
Where's that hesitancy come from?
Yeah, I don't like the term because I think there's probably three real definitions of capitalism, and depending on your ideological framework, one of the three has more meaning. When I think of capitalism with my kind of more traditionalist viewpoint, I think of it in terms of just the freedom to transact. I don't think of it as a system of capital versus labor. I think of more of a free market economy is what I'm thinking of. And I know a lot of people don't see it as that. They see it as a power struggle.
From that same, I have that same kind of perspective. And yet I also appreciate that many people don't, that's not what they're thinking of when they hear that term.
Yep. Yeah, it's not like it. What I tend to use, the term I tend to use if I'm pressed is financialization. Because my view is that we have financialized everything. So we've created a price for everything, and we believe that pricing information is more accurate than it is. So I was listening to again John Kempf's podcast. We had the guy from White Oak Pasture on, and he was talking about how do I price the ground that I have worked to regenerate for 25 years? How do I price that versus my neighbor who's done conventional agriculture for the last 25 years, or maybe the last 100 years, whatever? Is there a price differential in the market? And there really isn't. That pricing information isn't that quality of soil, the organic matter, soil microbiology is not built into the price that he can charge for that acre. Now, I think that'll probably change over time, but
well, you had begun to describe financialization and the difficulty of, assigning a number to your topsoil versus your neighbors.
Yeah, so I'll kind of, yeah, I don't know. I mean, listening to Joel Salatin talk about cow days per acre, and he was getting 400, and his neighbors are getting 82, and there's value there. Now, part of that's management. It's not just the soil, but there's definitely something going on there. So I tend to think that as conventional ag yields start to decline, especially per unit of input, that someone will have to start paying attention to that, and I believe the market will start looking at it. I think that the market doesn't understand it yet and doesn't know how to measure it, but either way, it makes it difficult. I mean, I think the big issue for me coming off of listening to that podcast with, I wish I could remember his name, from White Oak Pastures, but listening to that podcast, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, Clay County, Georgia, I know where it is, but it's like what I'm doing right now. Like if I wanted to set my kids up with money, I'm doing the wrong thing. If I want to leave my kids a legacy and well cared for parcel of land, a place they can live, I'm doing the right thing. And my values are definitely more oriented towards leaving them a place they can live and grow food and would be healthy. So I told him after listening to that podcast, like, I'm not leaving you an inheritance. I just want you to understand that. I'm going to leave you a few acres of land, and that's it. So, but yeah.
I don't wonder, I have an opinion about this, but my sense is that since the kind of the really beginning prior to the post-war, or prior to World War II, we began financializing our market in a weird sort of corporatist kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that makes sense, but we began building infrastructure and investing in infrastructure that enables a really large scale. So we socialize this cost, meaning that everybody contributed to the financing of this infrastructure that enables a really large producer in a really far away location to affordably bring their product to someone that is distant. And so we've
Yep.
socialized the cost of the supply chain and privatized the reward, and
Yep.
privatized the reward in a way that is particularly beneficial to really large scale producers who approach production in a financialized way where they're not concerning themselves with the quality of their topsoil 3 generations from now. And so
Right.
the smaller producer who is concerned about those things is at a disadvantage given the way we built our infrastructure. Um, and I think about that
Well, I think
everything from go ahead. What's your
no, I
reaction to
agree
that?
with
Because
that.
you're
I
in
think
the you're yeah.
yeah. Well, I think so. I agree, and I do think it did start. I mean, I don't want to point blame it. I don't want to be like a libertarian, shrill libertarian saying the Fed, But Federal Reserve came along in 1913, and
Yeah.
I think, and then you had the Great Depression along with the different the New Deal with all the different infrastructure projects. And at the post World War One, you had a lot of that corporatist kind of military corporatist governance come in. I think all those things are related for
Mm-hmm.
sure. I just think it's accelerated quite
Organization man
rapidly.
mentality.
Hmm. Yep.
I will go back a little
And
before the
it's
Fed. I think you can go
yeah.
back a lot before the Fed in some ways, but significantly. And we have talked about this in the very last, it hadn't come out yet, but the last episode, Charlie Gardner, a lawyer and a historian of the law, we spoke about this a good bit. There's a Wilson versus Shaw Supreme Court decision in 1907, which where the Supreme Court, which up to that point had, and since the days of the founders had held that the federal government could not invest in what it called internal improvements. It couldn't build infrastructure. And the debates around that the founders had, it was very much around this end. They were like, why should the federal government be in the business of making it easier for a business in some part of the country to sell its goods and compete with someone else and not have to pay their portion of the cost of that infrastructure? And that was 1907. But the decision, where that changed, and that was under Teddy Roosevelt. But anyway, Charlie and I go into that a good bit there. But at least to
Oh,
maybe relieve your feeling that you throw all the blame at the Fed, I think it does go back a little bit
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. I was I was a little joking, joking a little bit there, but yeah,
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing where it shows up today for someone like me is in meat processing because
Mm-hmm.
it's so consolidated. There's a few out there. There is demand, and more people are trying to get into it, but it's a $2.5 to $3 million investment to open a minimal size plant. I looked into it. Like I was seriously thinking about what if we did this. There's an old meat processing plant about 20 miles from here, and I was, thinking about it. And
So that it's Will
you can
Harris
still
is
hear
the
me,
owner
okay?
of White Oak Pastures. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear
Will,
me?
yeah, Will, okay, yeah, I can, yeah.
So yeah, you
Okay, good.
saying
I was just
that,
making
then
sure.
I kind of triggered. But he built his own USDA processing
Yeah,
facility. I mean, you
yeah,
should get in, I guess, maybe talk to him. But it was an enormous
yeah,
investment.
yeah. Greg Gunthorp's done the same thing. He's a guy I follow on Twitter. Jake Wolke, also on Twitter in Australia, has a butchery. So he pays the abattoir to kill the animal, then he brings it to his own butcher shop. And there's a lot of different ways to integrate vertically, but it's very difficult to do USDA processing in the United States where you can sell across state lines if you wanted to, at a price that's reasonable. And the cost for me, since I started in 2021, going to the market, my first pigs going to the market in 2021, the cost to me is up about 40% since I started.
Mm-hmm.
And that's only been 3.5 years. So that's where it shows
Is
up
it,
for a
and that's
small producer.
not,
I think that's
it's not limited to, but you have some exceptions as a small producer on poultry. Is that right?
poultry.
You can do
There's a
some of
federal
your own
exemption.
processing,
Yeah,
but
so
for beef and
we've
pork,
been
that's
granted
not
the
the case.
nothing other than poultry. There's really not an exemption. There are some programs where
Mm-hmm.
you can have food processed by, under a state inspection. So it's kind of a little bit like what the Prime Act would be trying to do. And there are some
Mm-hmm.
states that participate in that. South Carolina is one where you can have meat processed and packaged and sold within the state lines. But I haven't messed with it. When I spoke to the state inspector folks, meat and poultry inspection people from Clemson University Extension, they were very much like they had opinions about who should be doing processing meat, and I followed their advice. I took their advice, and that's where I take my meat. So it's difficult. We do take advantage of the federal exemption on poultry, so we process most of the whole birds here. But if we want to introduce any other products like sausage or anything like that, we have to have that done at a USDA inspected facility. So we sell some chicken sausage. Those guys have to go to the processor. I cannot add anything to the meat. Basically under the federal exemption, I can cut it up. I can package it in different configurations, but I cannot add anything to the meat. So that's where it
And
shows up
so
for me, at least
the
as a
net
small
effect
farm.
of that is so I don't know when that started. I imagine it started 50 or 60 years ago. Um, but prior to that point, what would someone who was raising cattle and selling beef, how would it work for them?
Yeah, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I'm assuming that before the regulations, I'm guessing a lot of the regulations came in, what was it, in the 20s when you had the jungle, right, that came out. Trying to remember
Sinclair
my old
Lewis.
U.S. history, Sinclair Lewis, the
Yeah.
jungle. Yeah, I'm guessing a lot of that stuff came in around that time. But neighbor to neighbor, right? That's what the model would have been. And when I was a kid, I mean, this again, memories that I have, butchering hogs and butchering a steer over Christmas break at my grandfather's house. You had all the black, cast iron cauldrons out there, blackened from soot and stuff. Uh, you know, shoot the pig, bleed it, hang it from the front end loader of the tractor, gut it, you know, scald it, scrape off the hair, and process the whole animal right there in about I don't know 7 or 8 hours to do two animals, I guess is what I
Mm-hmm.
remember, something like that. And ground their own meat for the sausage. They had their own smokehouse where they would salt and hang the hams to cure. So I have those memories, and that's a production model that could be achieved again. And if I could sell that ham to my neighbor, that cured ham to my neighbor, why not, right? But not allowed to. You know, I don't know what to say. I mean, I feel like we're trying to follow the rules, even though I bristle under the yoke of that regulation. I do feel like when I see somebody on Facebook going, "Hey, I don't want to go through the government, but I've got," I'm pissed off because I'm like, I'm trying to follow the rules, even though I don't agree with them. I'm still trying to follow them. I don't know. I don't know what the more
Well, you
noble
have to.
cause
I mean,
is. I
you
don't know
have
if
to
we should
follow
be.
them.
Yeah, yeah,
Do you have any
yeah. Well, there's
hope
people
for the
out there
Prime
trying to.
Act?
I don't know, man. I feel like the lobby is probably pretty strong to try to keep that from happening. And I don't think that the USDA really wants to deal with having so many inspectors. Um, because you'd have to have an inspector on the kill floor all the time. Um, for whatever processing plant. So if I wanted to open one, I'd have to have a USDA inspector at my farm or at my processing plant. We talked to a guy that's getting ready to retire about maybe working with him. But I got a lot of other things on my plate right now, so this hasn't worked out yet. But
Sure. Yeah.
there's I think there's a lot of ways that we can improve it, even under the current rules. But the current rules are really they're designed to benefit. Think about like a large company that's running. Going back to your comment about the infrastructure, they're running 24 hours a day. They're killing thousands of animals, maybe hundreds per hour. They have to have one inspector on the kill floor. Well, how big is their kill floor? If you're one guy doing 8 or 9 large ruminants a day and maybe 150 pigs a day, how big's your kill floor? And you got to pay an inspector of equal qualification for each of those jobs. That's hard scale, economy of scale to overcome from a cost perspective, and that cost is passed on to the processor. So I think that's the big area of concern for me. Like I said, we are taking advantage of the poultry exemption, and we do pretty much all of our whole birds we do here. That's an area where time and how much is my time worth comes into play. Because if I'm going to set aside a Saturday to do that, that's all I do, pretty much.
Yeah. Right.
I'm going to get, yeah. So that's a big commitment when I have essentially 4 Saturdays a month or so that I can allocate 100% to the farm. Spending 25% of that available time on processing is a big ask. So sometimes we do the math and we say, not going to work out this time to do it on farm. We'll have to take it to the processor, and we do both depending on my schedule and urgency and things like that. So, but yeah,
You do have. I mean, time is. Are you familiar with the notion of time preference? Economic notion of the economic term.
Yep.
Yeah. I understand that as a low time preference person, would you? I mean, you kind of seem like you're a low time preference person, even though it's not necessarily serving your economic interest to be that way.
Correct.
A manifestation of that is perhaps that you own a scythe. How often do you use your scythe?
Right. This is prime scything season for us because the ryegrass comes in pretty strong right now. And so I picked up one from American Scythe, I think it's called, the outfit up in I want to say Maine, that they make an European style with the straight snath. So I picked one up from them. Very, very rhythmic thing, very kind of mindful Zen kind of state you can get into doing it. And then last year I found one in there's a hardware store here in town run by a guy named Summers, and it's fascinating. He's got an old cook stove, wood fired cook stove that came out of a mill kitchen. He wants 20 grand for it, and if I had an extra 20 grand, I would own that thing. I love it. But he's got all this kind of salvage stuff in there, and he's got a bunch of old tools. I found a new in the box Stanley hand plane. I think it was a number 5 from like the 70s, and it was just sitting on the shelf, like just sitting there, new in the box from the 70s. So anyway, he's got all this old stuff in there, and he's got some new stuff. And I went in there one day, and he had an American Scythe handle, so I picked it up, and I thought, well, I can use it with the blades that I have from the European side that I ordered, and it's more adjustable to my smaller kids, like my daughter and stuff. And then a guy locally here had 3 American Scythe handles, one of which was almost completely, rotted and termite damaged. And it was a very old one. It had a very different, like the modern American style scythe has a bolt that goes through to kind of hold the blade on. This one had a couple of rings that you basically just hammer down. Okay. And so I've saved all that hardware with the idea that I could reuse it somewhere. But so I have a total of 3 American side handles and 1 European side, and I've got a couple of old rusty blades I'm going to try to see if I can restore. But I got them thinking that I could do some small scale haying and small scale grain production, and thinking more of time in my life when I won't have to have a 9 to 5 email job or whatever. So it'll probably be a few years from now, but hopefully when I get into some of that small scale hay and grain production and give it a try. So right now we'll go use it like probably next week. We'll do some. So
I guess I'm probably a month or so away up here in the mountains.
Yeah.
A friend of mine gave me a scythe and I wasn't looking for one or asking for one, and a friend of mine gave me one for my birthday last year, and it was late in the season, so I haven't really had an opportunity to go use it, but I'm excited to. I don't know that this works out, but this I talk about him a decent amount. This writer, philosopher, theologian Ivan Illich wrote about this notion of counterproductivity. And are you familiar with Illich?
I know the name, but I couldn't tell you what he wrote or anything. Yeah.
Well, his counterproductivity thing, the classic example he gives is like, so you add up all the time that you spend earning money to buy your car, earning money to pay for the maintenance of your car, looking at commercials about your car or auto insurance or making decisions about all those things. And you add all those things up, and then you add to it the time you spend in your car going places. And when you fully load your whole time, you're really only traveling an average of about 4 or 5 miles an hour, which is the same speed as a horse. And when I think about this, and of course, that is, I think, maybe directionally accurate, and there is some truth to that, but certainly it's not entirely accurate. But I think about that a bit with the scythe, and how much field can a man scythe in a certain amount of time, and they can just go out and do it without any other work going into it on top of that. And a good friend of mine who knows me pretty well saw that and thought maybe I deserved a scythe.
Well, I think like when I look at haying as a practice for supporting the farm, we buy hay, and I look at hay as portable fertility, essentially. More than forage, I look at it as portable fertility. So I can buy fertility from my neighbor for $40 a round bale. That's a good deal for me. Even if I just drop it on the ground, it's still a good deal for me because I just moved some fertility from that land to my land. So I think about it that way. If I can put it through the rumen of a cow, I've probably 2 or 3 times the fertility. So I think about it more in terms of fertility. I've never really thought of it in terms of
explain to me that. Explain what that means.
Well, I mean, I'm not a big believer in like zero sum games or whatever, and I'm not a big believer in. I am a big believer, however, in circular systems, right? So what I'm trying to build on the farm is a circular system where we are recycling the fertility and we're enhancing fertility by, like I said, passing things to the rumen of a cow, or depositing the urine and feces from pigs and chickens into specific places so that we can leverage that fertility for improving pasture or growing gardens or whatever. So what I'm talking about with hay is I am basically taking nitrogen, carbon, etc., potentially some other micronutrients or whatever, but I'm taking, NPK from someone else's property and I'm moving it to my property. And so if I think about it from that perspective, doing hay on my property, which is heavily wooded, rolling hills, would take a lot of machinery hours and diesel to turn into ground that I could actually grow hay and harvest hay on. Then I would have to invest probably about $100,000 in the basic equipment if you bought it new, it'd be at least that. And, you could probably do, 25 or 30 for used equipment, especially if you already had a tractor, which I do. But, that's a pretty heavy investment. How many bales of hay can I buy for $40 a bale if I was going to spend, let's say, $30,000 on equipment? Probably just doesn't make any sense. And the amount of time that it takes. The other thing that, you talk about counterproductivity. The other thing that strikes me about tools, right? And this is something that I think a lot of people that getting into homesteading don't understand, is how important it is to take care of your tools and how important it is to understand how to prepare your tools for the job. And that, primarily when you're talking about a lot of these hand tools, you're talking about blade, some sort of blade, which has to be sharpened. Being capable of having the right tools, et cetera, to properly sharpen your tool for the job, first of all, makes the job much more efficient because a scythe that's sharp, not a lot of effort, really isn't. If a scythe that's not sharp, that you're like hacking at the grass trying to get it to cut, that's a lot of effort and not efficient. So, when you talk about preparing your tools for the job and making the job as efficient as you can, that sharp axe or that sharp chisel, a sharp scythe, is a big deal. It's a big multiplier. When you look at, if I was going to do hay on 100 acres, which is what I could probably max out at doing hay on 100 acres if I just knocked down every tree here and flattened it out as much as I could probably do 100 acres of hay. It's $30,000, and I might get, I don't know the numbers today, what guys are getting this year for hay, but I'm going to get a certain number of bales per acre at $40 a bale. I just can't make that math work, and I have the additional benefit of bringing that fertility onto my land. So I can't make the math work to produce hay for myself. That's the way I see it.
Understood.
Did I answer your question? I'm not sure I answered your question.
I think you did. Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm just trying to learn. I'm just here to learn. I
don't know
understand.
enough.
Are you comfortable talking about farms on Maine?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah,
so
I'd love to hear about that. And something I also don't want to not talk about is the connection between the work you're doing on the farm and the fertilization of your community and how that connects with promoting, fostering, nurturing community.
Yeah. So,
but start with farms on Maine, please.
Yeah. So we're working on this concept. We're calling it Farms on Maine. We're going to operate under the same LLC as the farm so that we can continue to sell poultry processed under the federal exemption. That's one of the requirements. You have to sell it directly to the consumer. So we'll continue to operate under that LLC for that purpose. But yeah, what we want to do is have a store where we can feature farm products from within 60 miles of Newberry. And we are expecting that we will be able to have a pretty solid lineup of meats, raw dairy, produce, fresh cut flowers, microgreens, and we're going to add to that a zero waste refillery, so people can come in and we'll do as much local as we can, but some of those things obviously will be from other places. We haven't found an effective, efficient way to grow olives for oil or whatever. So we'll have some things that will come from other parts of the country or world, but we're going to try to be as local as we possibly can, but provide people an opportunity to shop for most of the things that you would buy at a grocery store, other than chemicals and paper goods and whatnot. So if it's food, we pretty much would have an option for you. I don't know if we figured out the pricing model for that. Again, it's probably low time preference and not exactly the most efficient or effective economic investment or financial investment. But we're working to finish up building out that retail space at 1207 Main Street here in Newberry. And once that's ready, we'll open our doors and we'll hopefully be serving customers beef, lamb, chicken, pork, turkeys, duck, like I said, all those other things, all from within 60 miles of here. So that's a big project of ours. We really want to build something in our downtown that is for people who live downtown. Yeah, so we're trying to build something that's not for the tourist. It's obviously we would accept tourist money. We'd love to have people come from wherever they are to frequent our town and purchase products there that support local farms. So whether it be refillery products or local farm products, we'll have those available, and we take anyone's money, of course. But we want to do something that really our community can frequent, and that they won't have to patronize an out-of-state chain that brings in that commoditized, financialized food supply chain product that ultimately we could support local folks and build local jobs and have local exchange with our neighbors. That's what we want to build. So we're going to try to do delivery within the city, and maybe some CSA pickup spot type stuff. Just really try to figure out how we can serve the community and help promote local farms.
And you're close, right? The pictures I've seen have made it look like you have the retail space. You're renovating it now.
We've got to do rough in for plumbing, electrical. We hope to be further along, but as a lot of people are experiencing, a lot of things cost more than they used to. So we had a certain amount of money set aside, and we've had to go a little slower than we hoped, but we're really close now. As soon as we get the rough in done and we get our inspections, then we'll just have to go finish out the space, which is going to be, basically paint and flooring. That's not too bad. We'll handle that probably in a couple weekends with ourselves and a few friends.
You own the building, or are you leasing it?
We're buying the building. We purchased the building last July. So that's kind of what we're thinking of. Again, investing in our place, trying to invest in our community instead of, look, I don't want to be too critical. You could look at me and say, look, you lived your life all over the place. You came back here. Maybe you're not really a native either, but I mean, I have deep roots here, like I mentioned. I bump into my cousins and uncles and stuff at different events around town. So we're from here, and we're trying to build something for the people who are here. So instead of maybe a guy with out-of-state money, buying up those buildings, we want to be a contributor to that, keeping it local as we can.
Well, I mean, regardless of wherever you might be from,
that's the goal.
You're making that place your home, and doing commerce with those people in your home, and building relationships with them. Jeffrey, I've loved speaking with you, and I have to say, I would really like to make this a part 1 of part 2, and I'd love to come by the farm and do it face to face. Where you're on my path of travel in my triangle between Charleston, Atlanta, and Glenville. And I'm hoping this will work. If it hasn't been obvious to the folks listening so far, we've had a lot of technical problems. I think they're largely my problems. So, So hopefully we will get that worked out, and hopefully this will work. But Geoffrey, if you could, so I follow Geoffrey on Twitter. That's how I met him at Long Story Farms. That's the handle. But where else should people look to find more information about your farm?
So Facebook and Instagram, we also have accounts there, and we just set up a farm store using Barn to Door. So we're on Barn to Door now. I think it's longstoryfarms.com if I'm not mistaken. But I'll be putting that link on Twitter soon, so you can find us there through that link and purchase some product if you're nearby. We're not really offering shipping right now, but if you're nearby, we'd be glad to help you out with some sustainably raised non-GMO pork or poultry. So,
well, that sounds great. I look forward to buying some and coming by and visiting with you. Geoffrey, thanks a ton for being here.
We really need to do the Southern Agrarians.
What's that?
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it, Jeff. I said we have to do the Southern Agrarians.
So I think that needs to be part 2, because much of what you've opened the door to directly relates to what they've written about, what Wendell Berry writes about, and others. And I know that that's important to you, and I think it's important to a lot of the people that listen to this podcast, of the dozens of people that listen to this podcast. Thank you, Geoffrey. I'll talk to you again soon.
The dozens. We're reaching one at a time.
That's right.
Thank you. All right.
All righty.